In the age of smartphones, built-in webcams, and massive anonymous internet communities that are experiencing levels of traffic that history has never seen before, the battle against child sexual exploitation takes on a new form every single day. Often, survivors are not speaking out, and when they do, their stories are met with disbelief.
That's why we need frontline service providers like law enforcement, social services, and psychological and medical health care professionals to help survivors find their voice and reclaim their lives. We also need to understand the changing nature of child sex abuse in the 21st century. We need to gather evidence that is used to prosecute perpetrators, and we need to provide survivors with the unique services they need to fully recover and rejoin their communities.
In 2017, the Canadian Centre for Child Protection conducted a survey of survivors of child sexual abuse imagery, commonly known as child pornography. The study found that in most cases of child sex abuse, the abuse began when the child was a toddler or infant and was usually carried out by trusted adults, such as parents and close relatives. Oftentimes, the abuse didn't stop until adulthood.
Many victims of the most dire and ongoing sexual abuse are the ones least likely to reach out for help. They may be more socially and physically withdrawn from their peers and resources, psychologically injured due to years of ongoing abuse, or otherwise convinced that their abuser's behavior is normal. They may also fear that reporting their abuse will result in harm or death to either themselves or someone that they love.
And yet, our justice system still fundamentally relies on the outcries of these children in order to discover instances of sexual abuse. But the data is definitive. Expecting vulnerable children to report their own abuse is simply not a sufficient strategy for addressing this crime. Only 35% of survivors report having disclosed their abuse while it was happening. And even when they do, they often are not believed.
When survivors are asked why they didn't choose to disclose, the responses are myriad. They include feelings of shame, fear of retaliation from the abuser, lack of opportunity to safely report, and or the belief that they might be found responsible for their own abuse.
The vast majority of survivors and witnesses who speak out about ongoing child abuse are not believed by the adult that they report to. It's evident that we need better avenues for stopping hands-on abuse. According to responders to the international survey, the intervention of law enforcement or social workers only ended the sexual abuse 20% of the time.
The statistics are even more grim when we consider how the production of child sexual abuse imagery plays into the investigation and discovery of child sex abuse. Survivors reported that the imagery of their abuse was uncovered at the same time as their hands-on abuse only 15% of the time.
This is significant for many reasons. Most importantly, it implies that frontline service providers are not currently following a protocol that ensures the timely discovery and containment of child sex abuse imagery. This means that these images can be trafficked online, and survivors can be subject to lifetimes of re-traumatization.
These days we record everything. When was the last time you didn't have a camera somewhere on your body? In the modern age, more than ever, it is crucial that we reorient our practices to address the growing size and the anonymous, global nature of the child sex abuse imagery trade.
Today, over 100,000 people access child sex abuse images online every week. Between 2004 and 2013, the number of cases of commercial sexual exploitation filed in the United States doubled. And in the past decade, so have annual child pornography offenses.
Of course, child sex abuse and child pornography predate the existence of the internet and even the invention of the camera. But the rapidly changing nature of technology impacts this distinct crime, making it far more widespread and insidious, with profound implications for both victims and society.
Survivors of child sex abuse imagery experience a lifelong impact. They often fear recognition by viewers of their abuse and experience a constant state of re-victimization due to the knowledge that their abuse exists on the internet forever and has been viewed by untold numbers of viewers. 95% of victims report needing ongoing therapy, and up to a third say that they have been approached, recognized, or re-victimized by those who have viewed their abuse.
The International Survey of Survivors found that 50% of child pornography survivors were abused in organized networks of predators. The roles of frontline service providers cannot be overemphasized in disrupting these networks and preventing the trafficking of abuse imagery. Social workers, medical personnel, and therapeutic professionals are best able to identify the warning signs of victimization and provide the unique support that child sex abuse victims in the internet age need in order to recover. Law enforcement protocol that ensures the identification and containment of child abuse imagery is critically necessary, both to prevent further trauma, as well as provide prosecutors with the evidence they need to successfully prosecute the crime. Moreover, photographic evidence could eliminate the need for a trial in its entirety, which could save a child from the trauma of having to testify against a loved one.
Regardless of profession, all of us are crucial participants in the battle against child sexual exploitation and need to be made aware of the warning signs of abuse, as well as taking children seriously when they report sexual maltreatment. 62% of respondents in the Canadian Centre survey actually disclosed their abuse, and still the abuse did not stop. Children desperately need and deserve a community full of trusted adults that will ensure that they are safe, will take them seriously, and that their abuse is not their fault.
But even more than that, we need proactive methods for uncovering and disrupting child sexual abuse imagery trafficking. And we need to develop best practice protocols that relies on the initiative and expertise of frontline service providers and other community members to identify and investigate cases of abuse and to provide survivors the effective support that they need to recover.
It was Mahatma Gandhi who once said, "A nation's greatness can be measured by the way it treats its weakest and most helpless citizens." In America, there is a pressing need for child welfare to be supported and for it to surpass the industries that work against it, for the benefit of survivors, for those at risk, and for the future generations for whom we can create a safer world free of this heinous industry.
The changing nature of technology has undoubtedly expanded the toolbox available to predators, but the same technology can be harnessed and used to aid in the investigation, identification, and persecution of these crimes. The role each of us can play in disrupting the trafficking of child sex abuse imagery and supporting the recovery and reintegration of survivors cannot be overstated. The change starts with you.